Why did even the demons fall to their knees before Jesus? The wind whispers through the forgotten ruins of the Gerasenes. The lake reflects a heavy silence, but something unseen stirs in the shadows. A man possessed by a legion, thousands of spirits, tears the night apart with his cries. These were not just human voices. They were echoes of hell. The documentary begins here, a forbidden encounter between the Son of God and the armies of Lucifer. What should have been just another miracle turned into one of the most mysterious and unsettling episodes in the Gospels. The demons do not attack him, they don't fight. Instead, they beg. They plead, "Do not send us into the abyss." But what was this abyss that even legions feared? And why did they choose pigs as their refuge? Picture this, an entire legion, servants of Lucifer, bowing before the authority of Christ. Isn't it strange that even the forces that challenge heaven recognize the power of the one who can undo them with a single word? And what if this scene was not only about liberation, but about a hidden strategy from Lucifer himself? The Bible gives us only fragments, but between the lines lies a deeper secret. The demons weren't only trying to escape. They were trying to make a point, because when they entered the pigs, the outcome was devastating. Thousands of animals stampeded in frenzy and hurled themselves into the abyss, drowning in the deep waters. For many, it was nothing more than the death of a herd. For Lucifer, it was a calculated display, proof that the presence of Jesus could bring material loss and destruction. But how much of that was chance? And how much was part of a plan? If even the demons knew they couldn't resist, why didn't they choose silence? What was so terrifying about this abyss that they feared more than death itself? The people of the region did not celebrate the man's freedom. They did not rejoice over light triumphing against darkness. They mourned the pigs, and they drove Jesus away. Lucifer had succeeded. A soul was saved, but an entire city rejected the divine presence. And so the question still echoes today. What is the true worth of a soul in a world that measures everything in numbers, wealth and possessions? But the story does not end here. If the demons begged for pigs, what was the real fear that made them tremble? And what if the key to understanding the abyss lies hidden in forgotten texts, those kept from reaching us? What do you think about this? Share your thoughts in the comments. What if the real hell wasn't fire, but eternal forgetting? The demons' request was not random. They begged Jesus not to cast them into the abyss. That word, almost whispered in the Gospels, carries far more weight than it seems. The abyss was not just a place. It was a cosmic prison, described in apocryphal texts like the Book of Enoch and even hinted at in Revelation. A realm where spirits are locked away, stripped of any influence over the world of the living. Not a fiery hell, but a frozen, silent void where even evil itself is forgotten. For the demons, being sent into the abyss meant losing the one thing they valued most, the power to corrupt. There they could not whisper temptations. They could not twist destinies. They would be erased from the human story. That is why they pleaded, not for mercy, but for survival. Because for a rebellious spirit, being forgotten is worse than being destroyed. But then comes the question, why didn't Jesus send them into the abyss? Why did he listen to their plea and allow them to enter the pigs instead? The choice seems contradictory, even unsettling. The Son of God, who held full authority over those legions, that could have ended their influence forever, yet he didn't. Why? Some scholars suggest the moment was meant to be a lesson. Others believe there was a greater hidden purpose in Christ's gesture. But what if Lucifer had already anticipated this encounter? What if the plan was exactly that, to twist the outcome and turn liberation into scandal? The entire herd plunged into chaos. Screams, dust, water. The lake became a stage of carnage, a scene designed to spark fear and rejection. In that instant, what looked like the triumph of light turned into doubt, fear, and loss. And the townspeople, instead of rejoicing, turned against the one who set them free. Here lies the disturbing detail. Lucifer managed to turn a miracle into a reason for rejection. But the most haunting question still lingers. If even the demons trembled at the thought of the abyss, what truly lies within that place of eternal forgetting? If this struck you, like this video and hit the share button to spread the word. When even animals rejected by the law become the stage of a spiritual war. If the abyss was the dreaded fate, why did the demons beg to enter the pigs? In Jewish tradition, the pig was the ultimate symbol of impurity. The law of Moses forbade it. It represented what was corrupt, what could never be offered to God. And it is precisely in this detail that the mystery deepens. The demons knew that by entering the pigs, they were not simply finding a temporary refuge. They were choosing the perfect symbol of rejection. It was a strategic move. If cast into the abyss, they would vanish from history. But by entering the pigs, they staged a public spectacle. Chaos. A maddened herd rushing toward the cliff, dragging with it the economy of an entire city. Lucifer knew that the people, instead of celebrating the freedom of a soul, would grieve over material loss. And that is exactly what happened. The dead herd became evidence against Jesus. The liberation of one man was overshadowed by the loss of many, and faced with that, the city did not rejoice. They expelled him. Isn't it disturbing to think that in that moment, Lucifer's strategy worked? A miracle twisted into scandal, a victory of light distorted into an accusation. But there is something even darker in this detail. Why did the pigs immediately rush to their destruction? Was it only animal instinct? Or were the demons revealing what they truly carried within themselves? Because if even irrational creatures, upon receiving unclean spirits, could not bear to live and hurled themselves into death, what does that say about us, who so often harbor darkness in silence? And here the story grows even more unsettling. The pigs were only a smokescreen. The real battlefield was not the lake, but the minds and hearts that in the presence of Jesus chose fear over faith. But the question still echoes. Was this just an isolated episode, or proof that Lucifer always manipulates symbols to turn crowds against the truth? Subscribe. What comes next is even darker. The greatest triumph of darkness is not to win, but to distort the victory of light. The episode of the pigs was not just a scene of chaos. It was a calculated rehearsal. Lucifer knew he could not confront Jesus directly. He could not resist his voice, nor challenge his authority. But he could manipulate human perception. He knew the people would focus on the outcome, not the essence. They would see dead pigs, but not a freed man. They would see material loss, but not the miracle of restoration. And it worked. The city drove Jesus away. The deliverer was rejected because someone twisted the narrative. This is the secret of Lucifer's strategy. He doesn't need to erase the truth, only distort the way it is seen. He turns liberation into scandal, light into threat, life into ruin. And it did not end in that forgotten region. The same tactic echoes through history. How many times has truth been rejected, not because it was false, but because it was manipulated to look inconvenient? Lucifer understood this long before anyone else. Crowds don't need facts. They need narratives. And if he managed to twist perception in front of Christ himself, what could he not do before kings, churches, and entire nations? But there is something even more disturbing. The scene of the pigs may have been more than a momentary manipulation. It may have been a coded warning, a message left by Lucifer. If even pigs rush into death when burdened with my presence, what will happen to an entire society that welcomes me? And the haunting question remains. When we choose the shadows, are we not doing the same, running blindly toward the abyss, while believing we are in control? Share this with someone who needs to see what has been hidden. What is a life worth when everyone is too busy counting losses? The man freed by the word of Jesus was not just a demoniac. He was someone forgotten, marginalized, cast out from human society, living among tombs, tearing his own flesh. He was the image of what hell does to human dignity. And in a single moment, everything changed. The legion fell silent. The invisible chains shattered. A man who was dead while alive returned to existence. But while the miracle unfolded, thousands of pigs drowned. What should have been a celebration turned into calculation. The people did not see the value of a restored soul. They saw only the wealth that was lost. And here is where Lucifer's plan reveals its cruelty. He managed to turn liberation into collective loss. He made an entire city believe that one man was worth less than a herd. This is hell's oldest lie, that things matter more than people, that wealth matters more than destiny, that material loss is more unbearable than eternal loss. And isn't that the same echo we still hear today? How many lives are sacrificed in the name of profit? How many souls are left behind because they do not produce, do not return, do not add to the world's riches? The deliverance of the Gerasene was more than a spiritual battle. It was a brutal revelation. The abyss is not only in the demons, it is in human choices. For whoever drives out the light out of fear of losing comfort has already thrown themselves wide awake into the same abyss that swallowed the pigs. And here rises the question no one dares to answer. When the Son of God walks toward us, are we ready to choose a soul over a treasure? Or do we still prefer the pigs over the presence of truth? Have you ever asked yourself this? Share your thoughts in the comments. Sometimes the greatest threat is not the darkness, but the light that exposes what we want to hide. The man who had been freed sat there, clothed in his right mind. The legion was gone. The miracle was undeniable. And yet, the townspeople did not bow before Jesus. They did not worship him. They did not thank him. They were afraid, a visceral, almost instinctive fear, and they begged him to leave. This reaction reveals something disturbing. The light was not rejected because it failed, but because it worked. With a single act, Jesus showed that the presence of God does not come to preserve our structures, but to shake everything we thought was unshakable. And that is unsettling. Because if a life is worth more than riches, where does that leave those who build their existence on gold, commerce, and profit? If the light sets free, what happens to those who thrive on keeping others bound? If the truth heals, what remains for those who prosper through lies? The city's fear was not of the miracle itself. It was of what the miracle meant. It was of what would have to change if that presence remained. And here lies the most chilling detail. Lucifer knew he didn't need to defeat Jesus. He only needed to plant fear in human hearts. He only needed to turn the Savior into a threat. And it worked. But the question lingers like an unsettling whisper. How many times, even today, do we reject the light not because it fails, but because it demands too much of us? Like this, if any part of this made you uncomfortable. The war didn't end at the lake of the Gerasenes. It only changed its battlefield. What happened that night by the lake was not an isolated event. It was the reflection of something much greater. An unseen pattern stretching across the centuries. A man set free, a city in panic, a Christ rejected. This is not just a story about demons and pigs. It is about a battle that never stopped. Lucifer does not wage war only against angels. He fights within human choices. He doesn't need to burn cities with fire and sulfur. He only needs to plant fear, doubt, and attachment to material things. And that night, the city of the Gerasenes proved how devastating that tactic can be. The legion knew they would be expelled. They knew they had no power against the voice that commanded them. But Lucifer knew he could still win in the realm of perception. He lost one man, but gained an entire city. That is the essence of the battle. It is not only about visible possession, but silent manipulation. It is not about inhabiting bodies when entire values, thoughts, and cultures can be possessed. The scene with the pigs was just a symbol of that truth. Just as those animals rushed blindly into the abyss, entire societies have been running toward the same fate, always for the same reason, because they trust fear more than liberation. And today, how many still look at the gospel and see only loss? Loss of pleasure, loss of freedom, loss of power. How many still drive Christ away because his presence threatens their systems, their wealth, their fragile securities? The episode echoes like a warning. The presence of Jesus always divides. It either frees or it disturbs. It either transforms or it exposes how much we don't want to change. And Lucifer knows this better than anyone. His strategy hasn't changed. He still turns miracles into scandals, faith into fanaticism, light into threat. He still manipulates narratives so that crowds would rather choose the pigs over the truth. And if an entire city once rejected Jesus out of fear, what about today, when that same spirit of manipulation governs empires, religions, media, and hearts? The question is suffocating. Aren't we repeating, on a global scale, the very same mistake of the Gerasenes? Choosing wealth over lives, silence over freedom, fear over transformation. Because if even the demons bowed before Christ, what does it say of us, who still drive him away for things worth less than a herd of pigs? The man was saved, but what about us? Are we truly free, or are we still running, like that crowd, toward a cliff we refuse to see? Subscribe. The truth doesn't stop here. Become a member for early access, exclusive content, and to choose the next topics. Some battles are not fought to be won, but to send a message. When the legion entered the pigs and the city rejected Jesus, something far deeper took place. It wasn't just a momentary move. It was a silent statement from Lucifer, carved into history as a coded warning. Watch what I can do. I can turn freedom into loss. I can twist miracles into scandals. I can make entire crowds drive out the light out of fear. That episode is, in truth, a manual of mass manipulation. And if we look closely, we'll see the same strategy echoing through every age of humanity. Lucifer doesn't always need violence. Sometimes all it takes is touching symbols. The pigs were a symbol of impurity, despised under Jewish law. By using them as his stage, he did more than cause financial damage. He struck at a cultural taboo, an emotional trigger, a symbol designed to stir repulsion. He knew symbols have power. They shape perceptions, define beliefs, and move entire crowds. And when twisted, they can be weaponized to push people away from truth. Even today, symbols remain the battlefield. Religions, flags, images, speeches, all can be inverted, manipulated, emptied of their original meaning, and turned into instruments of division, just like the pigs. And here lies the most unsettling detail. The city of the Gerasenes didn't reject Jesus because they misunderstood him. They rejected him because they understood too well. They saw his presence meant change, that nothing would remain the same, that his authority didn't just free one man, it threatened an entire system. And at that point, Lucifer's message still fulfills itself today. When light shows up, darkness doesn't need to fight. It only needs to manipulate fear. It only needs to whisper, if you let this presence remain, you'll lose everything you've built. How many times does that same voice still echo inside us? How often do we push truth away? Not because it isn't clear, but because it costs more than we want to pay. The episode with the pigs was not just a momentary victory for hell. It was a prophetic rehearsal, a declaration that the true war would not be won only in the spiritual realm, but in the battlefield of human perception. And the final scene, with one man restored and a whole city overcome by fear, remains an eternal symbol of a choice that never disappeared: to accept the truth that frees, or to cast it out because it unsettles us. But if that was only a warning, and then the question that still thunders is even more disturbing. What happens when that same strategy is unleashed on a global scale? Tag someone who would dare to watch this to the very end. In the heart of darkness, silence can be louder than any scream. So it was when Lucifer, after revealing Cain's pact, let a heavy pause linger, as if the very air refused to move. That emptiness was not just the absence of sound, but the echo of something far more dreadful, the waiting for destiny's next move. Cain, cursed yet shielded by the mark, now carried not only the weight of Abel's blood, but also the shadow of a secret lineage. Lucifer had turned him into the bearer of a future the earth was not yet ready to receive, and that future would come through the mysterious woman who joined him, sealing a covenant that would flow through humanity's veins like a slow, inevitable poison. Cain's wife, invisible in the traditional scriptures, was described by Lucifer as a chosen vessel, not shaped by the breath of God, but by the touch of the serpent crawling through the cracks of the world. Her womb would not simply bring forth children, but become the forge of a race walking between light and shadow. Not mere men, but heirs to a promise too dark for prophets to speak aloud. In the forgotten tale, Every child of Cain was more than a life. They were a seed of chaos, a spark of defiance against heaven's order. The climax comes when Lucifer declares that these descendants were the true architects of the first cities, the first to raise walls, craft instruments, shape iron and bronze. Where the sons of Seth built altars, the sons of Cain built towers. Where some sang hymns, others tuned strings to summon invisible powers. And here the story brushes the edge of blasphemy. If Cain's wife birthed a lineage marked by rebellion, was she in truth the first priestess of hell, a hidden Eve opening a parallel path to divine creation? The tension deepens when we see how Cain's descendants appear in ancient records, not only as sinners, but as masters of forbidden arts and technologies that still defy the logic of faith. The tale suggests this lineage carried codes, symbols, and secrets that shaped empires and kingdoms, as though the curse itself had turned into power. But then comes Lucifer's most disturbing whisper. The pact did not end with Cain. It lived on, across eras, infiltrating thrones, priesthoods, and crowns. Every time the world seemed ready to rise again under divine justice, Cain's lineage resurfaced, pulling the strings from the shadows. And now the silence grows unbearable. If that bloodline still exists, if the heirs of the pact still walk among us, then the mark of Cain is not just an ancient sign, but a living password hidden within the powerful who rule unseen empires. What if the true rulers of the world, the ones who steer economies, wars, and religions, are direct descendants of that forgotten blood pact? The silence that follows this question is not empty. It is the prelude to a revelation even more devastating, when Lucifer saves for the final act. If you think you've already uncovered the secret behind Cain's pact, subscribe, ring the bell, and dive with me into the truth buried beneath centuries of silence. If truth were only a story, it wouldn't still haunt us today. The abyss the demons feared, the miracle ignored by the Gerasenes, the subtle manipulations of Lucifer. Everything converges into one point: the blood pact that crosses generations, a pact forgotten yet alive, a thread that ties the end of one age to the shadows of the modern world. Lucifer watches, patient, calculating every move. He doesn't need brute force. He only needs to shape perceptions, whisper fear, and twist symbols. The episode of the pigs was only a rehearsal. Even the demons bound to him feared the abyss and begged for refuge. But what Lucifer truly wanted to reveal was this: humanity can be persuaded to reject the light, to expel the truth in exchange for fear, safety, or material comfort. And here enters Cain's pact. The forgotten woman, erased by tradition, was not merely Cain's first partner. She was the vessel of a lineage that would carry rebellion against heaven itself. Her descendants were not just survivors. They built cities, manipulated systems, moved invisible kingdoms, and kept the secret that power could be born from exile, from defiance, from the curse. This is where the unsettling realization strikes. The same logic behind the episode of the pigs, the manipulation of a city, repeats itself through every age. Lucifer doesn't need weapons or fire. He operates in the unseen, in the psychological, in the collective. Every war, every scandal, every lie that convinces the masses that truth is dangerous is another extension of the same pact. And then the final question thunders across history. If the abyss still waits, if Cain's bloodline still walks among us, if symbols and fears still shape our choices, how free are we really? What Lucifer reveals, silent, provocative, is that the war is not merely spiritual, it is existential. Every choice, every attachment, every rejection of truth is an echo of that lake in Gerasa, of those pigs plunging into destruction, of that freedman ignored by the crowd. In the end, the message is both disturbing and symbolic. It is not evil that binds us. It is fear, blindness, and the comfort found in chaos. Freedom exists, light exists, but those who choose the abyss over transformation, who walk blindly past the truth, unknowingly perpetuate Lucifer's pact. And if all of this is real, if what we call history, tradition, or chance is only a chapter in a greater plan, the question that echoes is unavoidable. Would you still choose the pigs? Or would you allow the light to free your own soul? Write your truth below. Share if you dare to confront what humanity has always avoided facing. Because the pack continues, and now you are part of this story.